morning. My name is Jim Kenny, and I am the co-chair of the Town Manager Search Committee. Our search committee had its first meeting in December, and our focus from that meeting has been on two tasks. The first task was to identify, evaluate, and select an executive search firm that specializes in municipal government searches. That task has been completed as the Town Council approved our recommendation to engage strategic government resources, and the agreement has been executed, and SGR has begun their work. Our second task is what has brought us here this morning. In December, we began a dialogue with Mark Levin at Indiana University School of Public and Environmental Affairs. We asked Mark to work with us in providing our council with an information session to assist them in their transition from a council form of government to a council manager form of government. We sought out Mark because of his knowledge in this form of government. Currently, Mark is educating our future professional municipal government leaders. He teaches graduate courses in local government, management, and government budgeting. Prior to entering into the academic world, Mark worked 41 years in municipal management. Most recently, he served as city administrator of Maryland Heights, a suburb of St. Louis, from 1985 when the city was incorporated until July of 2015. While Maryland Heights is a city and has a mayor, it operates in a council manager form of government. Maryland Heights has what is referred to as a weak mayor form of government, where the mayor has no more authority than the other members of council and is in a position very similar to the president of an Indiana town council. We asked Professor Levin to form a panel made up of Indiana town managers and town council members. The objective of having such a panel is to learn from the experience of others who have worked in a council manager form of government. The members of the council are, by the way, this is Professor Levin right here, and we've got Dustin Anderson. He's the town manager of Munster, and Dustin, prior to his current position, served as special project manager for Greenwich, Connecticut, a town of 62,000 people, for 4 years. Prior to that, he worked from 2007 to 2010 for Cincinnati-based management partners specializing in local government consulting. He has a bachelor's degrees in political science and criminal justice from Indiana University, as well as a master's of public affairs from IU. Then we have at the end down here is Ian Nicolini. He's the town manager of Speedway, Indiana. Ian has served as town manager of Speedway since May of 2014. Previous to that, he was town manager and administrator in the Northwest Indiana community of Cedar Lake. He served for 6 years on the board of directors for the Indiana Municipal Management Association and also served as their president. He has a BS and a Master's of Public Administration from the School of Public and Environmental Affairs at Indiana University. Right here we have Pete Olson. Pete is the current town manager at Yorktown and has held that position since 2009 when he was elevated from the position of deputy town manager. Prior to serving in Yorktown, Pete spent 2 years in Union City, Indiana as their first city manager and 4 years as a city administrator in Sutton, Nebraska. Pete obtained his Master's of Public Administration from the University of Nebraska, Omaha, and his Bachelor of Arts from Fort Hays State University. In addition to his MPA, Pete is a credentialed manager through the International City County Managers Association. Pete is a board member of the Indiana Managers Association, including service as secretary, VP, and president of the association. As part of his current responsibilities, he's sitting on the IAC board of directors. Pete is also a licensed football official in the state of Indiana, which he tells me he finds useful for council meetings. Jeff Matthews was going to be here today. He's from, he's your council member from Speedway. He had something come up in his business and was unable to attend, but representing the council member, we have Rich Lee from Yorktown, sitting right here, and he is currently the president and in his second term with the council. He is the president of the Regal Group, a sales and marketing firm that's been in business for 20 years. Rich is a graduate of Ball State University, where he majored in finance and business administration. So So our plan today is to start by having each member of the panel share their experiences in working in a council manager form of government. Rich will share his experience from the perspective of a council member, Mark, Dustin, Ian, and Pete from the perspective of a town manager. We have asked them to discuss and answer questions about the roles and relationships of the manager council, how the council's role will be different with a town manager, the typical authorities delegated to a town manager, and how the town manager position has brought value to their communities. After each of them have had time to provide us with their individual thoughts, we're going to break for lunch. And to be respectful of everyone's time on a beautiful Saturday, once everyone is served, we will finish lunch during a question and answer period. We feel that the information our panel shares will help launch and guide our town council for the next step in our process, which is the development of a position description. While some town managers' responsibilities are required by state law, other responsibilities are at the discretion of the council. We encourage our council to ask questions of the panel to better prepare us as we determine what additional tasks and responsibilities would be advantageous to assign to this position. Gaining this information is an important early step in our process. This information will be used to develop a position profile. The position profile is a document that will communicate to our potential candidates what our job expectations are, what our educational and job experience levels we are seeking, and then potential candidates will use this position profile to help them determine if our position is a good fit for them. I want to thank our department heads, members of the public, and media for your interest today and listening to our panel and learning more about a council manager form of government. A few housekeeping items before we start. The restrooms are right outside this door. We have an exit in the back and an exit through here. So if you need to slip out, you can go through the back or through the front. We are in a fire department. So there may be a fire call today, and we'll, I guess, hear that through the speakers. We'll just pause there and let the announcement go forward, and then we'll continue. We're filming this session today for a couple of reasons. SGR, the company we hired, we're going to provide this information to them so they can learn a little bit more about us, get a better feel for us as they start working with us. We'll be able to share this with the media and potentially put it on our website, correct, Mr. Yoki? So that's why we're filming today. And I'd also like to thank Dave Despinet, who generously has provided our lunch today. And having said those housekeeping things, Professor Levin, I'm going to turn it over to you and the panel.
Good morning. Congratulations on what those of us in the profession think is a significant opportunity here for both you and the profession to create a great job. What we also understand is that this represents significant change. And as you all know, whether it's good change or bad change, all change is stressful. And so part of our efforts here is to try to reduce some of the anxiety and tell you that some of that stress that you're going to go through is normal. And that bringing on anybody, whether you've had this position for weeks or years, it's a change, and there's always going to be some rough edges. Pete says that his experience as a football official has guided him in his work with the city council. I draw on my experience as a social studies teacher in an inner city junior high school as a good background for working with the city councils I've had to deal with. I started my local government experience as a department head in a large suburb of Cleveland, Ohio. I was responsible for community and public relations. I was promoted to Director of Human Services. I was promoted to Assistant to the Manager and then Deputy City Manager. I was there for a total of 6 years. My first city manager's job was in a small suburb allegedly in the Chicago metropolitan area. We were about as far from Chicago as you could get and still claim to be in the Chicago metropolitan area, a city of 6,200 people. I was the fourth manager in less than 10 years. This was a federally funded new town that had all sorts of challenges, including a big chunk of it owned by the federal government when the developer went bust. I was there for a little under 3 years. I was fired. I then got a position as the village manager of a larger suburb of Chicago, Bolingbrook. I was hired there by a vote of 2 to 4. If you have time, we can spend time on that story. And then in 1985, I saw an ad in the ICMA newsletter. A new city had been incorporated in St. Louis, and they were looking for their first administrator. I interviewed, went through the process, and I was hired. So the city was incorporated in May. I started in August, about 100 days after the city was incorporated. They had, the police department had been hired, and they started the same day I did, but other than that, and a city clerk, there were no other employees. So my job was to put in place not only the hiring of staff, but the creation of positions, the drafting of policies, the creation of a purchasing manual, personnel manual, an administrative code, organizing the building. We were in a warehouse that was being converted to a city hall. And we were trying to figure out, did we have enough money to do all the things the residents and the council wanted to do. The typical city manager is in place on average about 7 years. That's when I started, it was about 3.5. Now it's up to about 7 years. I stayed in Maryland Heights for 30 years. At that point, I said, you know, it's time for somebody else. I've done about as much damage as I can do, and there's nobody else to blame but me, and left them in pretty good shape with a new community center under construction, no debt, $15 million in the bank, and a terrific staff, and great opportunities for additional development in a community that had 55,000 jobs but only 27,000 residents. So that sort of gives you sort of how I get here. What's my role? I was the chief operating officer of the municipal corporation. The city council made the policies, the city council approved the budget, the city council supervised me, and I was responsible for the day-to-day operations. I supervised all of the employees. I was the city's budget officer, I was the purchasing agent, I was the economic development officer for the city, and a few other things. Without getting too deep into the weeds, for a whole variety of reasons, we didn't have much in the way of political leadership, and so I had to do a lot more work in terms of facilitating policy making than most managers are comfortable with. But being a school teacher by training, I was comfortable getting up, putting things on the board and saying, pick something. It was a little bit more difficult than that. I think that what I learned was that every position, every manager's position is different. I don't think that I changed much over my career, but my performance in different cities was very different. And it all comes down to fit. You can give all the tests, you can do all of the research, you can go through all sorts of processes. The executive search firm will provide you with the names of people who are competent by experience, training, education, knowledge. They can all do the job. But only you can determine who fits Clarksville. Because what this is all about is finding somebody with whom you can vest significant trust and confidence, whose advice you are going to follow. You're going to pay somebody way too much money to ignore them. And so my expectation is that the city council will follow my advice, my recommendations, not less than 95% of the time. Now, you're free, and I better be able to justify it. I better be able to explain it. But if you're not going to listen to me, fire me and hire somebody else, because that's the nature of the job. And I think the other issue that I've learned is that in every government, on all varieties of issues, councils struggle with competing values. And it's your job to make value-based decisions, not technical decisions. Staff's job is to make technical decisions. Our job is to present you with value-based choices, good or bad, should or shouldn't. What has priority? And the biggest value balance that you're going to have to wrestle with is the balance between control and flexibility. How much flexibility are you going to provide the town manager to do the job, to have the authority to carry out the responsibility, versus how much control do you want to exercise? There is no right answer to that, and it can change over time. But you need to recognize that it is a trade-off. The more control that you try to establish and maintain and exercise, the less flexibility, the less authority, the less creativity that you're going to get from your town manager. If they have to come back every time there's a small change and say, I have to have a budget amendment because we went over in paper clips, but we got money for paper, obviously the process slows down. Where do you draw the line? How much spending authority do they have versus how much spending authority do you want to retain? How much hiring authority do they have versus how much hiring authority do you want to retain? Those are all value judgments. State law isn't going to tell you, your lawyer's not going to tell you, the consultant's not going to tell you where to draw that line. You have to work that out amongst the elected officials, and you have to have, and so you have to find somebody who you feel comfortable having that conversation with, because you can't do all of this in advance. It's going to be by trial and error, but you have to be willing to work with that employee and work these issues out and find somebody with whom you can communicate, with whom you can partner to make this a better town. I'm going to stop because I'm a professor now and I can profess all day.
Whoever you want to go with. We'll sit first.
Oh.
We'll leave the elected official to last.
That way I can fix all our mistakes.
That's right.
And I was going to ask, did I go after him so I can agree with him? But,
And there you are.
My name's Pete Olson, and I, to give you just a little bit of my background, I grew up in a small community of about 900 people in northwest Kansas, and then matriculated to Omaha and got my master's, as you heard, and then spent 4 years in a small community of about 1,400 people as their city administrator. I wasn't their first city administrator. It was probably their fourth, and I really cut my teeth. And so one of the things that I enjoy working on, because when you're in that small of a community, is the mayor looked at me when he hired me and he says, well, do you know how to fix a water main? And I said, well, I have no clue how to fix a water main. And he goes, well, what about a sewer main? Well, I have no clue how to fix a sewer main. He goes, well, you're going to learn. Okay. So he sent me out. In the first 6 months of my job, I was standing out in rubber boots learning how to fix water mains and how to fix sewer mains. And I know which one of those two I'd rather fix. Even at 40 degrees below weather, I would tell you which one I'd rather fix. But so I come up learning, you know, I got my master's. I understand the theory behind everything that is associated with being a town manager. But there's also the practical side of being a town manager. And so while I didn't have to write policies, what I had to make sure is we were going through some growth, that we were working through those things and that we're planning properly. And so when you ask about the things that are a town manager is going to be helping with, it is prioritization. It is strategically thinking, putting in place capital budgets, thinking about where you want to be. And they should be driving, as Mark said, they should be driving the council to look at that wall and say, what do you want to work on and why do you want to work on it? Because there may be 7 competing things, and you can't do 7 competing things in 1 year, but there needs to be that 120,000 foot view that if we have the right water system and we have the right sewer system and we have great roads and we have good staff, then that's the base. And what's the next step? How do we improve the quality of life? How do we engage the citizenry? How are we doing those things so that we're retaining younger people, that we're working with the right partners and doing those kinds of things? So, you know, I've been lucky in every step that I've made. I've been able to go in and either focus on that and learn it, which is what I was very lucky to do young, or now I come in and Rich and I were having the discussion on the way down, and just so you're all aware, I use this as a 5-hour time to meet with my council president so that we can be talking about, you know, not just how good the Colts are going to be next year, but also, hey, you know, we've got a new police hire, or we've got to be thinking about doing this for our downtown redevelopment project, or things of that nature. And so we're strategically thinking about where we want to be 5 years from now. And so that's something that I always think, you know, council needs to be looking at 120,000 feet. How do we operate our community? What is good? What are citizens demanding? And there's a number of ways to get those things, but don't, you know, my advice is don't dig into the minutiae. He talked about how much creativity and the freedom and flexibility that you're going to get, but he's absolutely right. If your goal is to come in and say, hey, we still want to be people that are responsible for hiring every individual, well, okay, what does that mean? And we have a situation in Yorktown where they hire them at the council meeting, but they don't sit in on any of the process of interviewing. They just approve the hiring. So if we have somebody leave, we bring a candidate in, we give them the 120. Here's we've gone through the process. We interviewed 40 people and then knocked it down to 10 and did the background checks or whatever else. So they're involved. They understand that position is funded, that position is there, but they're not saying, oh, no, I want Cousin Fred to have the position of wastewater treatment operator. And I'm going to be very blunt. I'm not from Indiana originally, but the mayor system in the state and the city system in the state of Indiana is focused on giving mayors and Board of Works the authority to hire and execute contracts and everything else. And those people often, and I watch it in East Central Indiana and the smaller cities. As soon as there's a new mayor, there's a new wastewater treatment operator, and that wastewater treatment operator has never worked in wastewater treatment ever in their life. Now, how many people would go out and put a firefighter on a hose or on a pumper truck, and pumper truck running what, $750,000 to buy a pumper truck today?
Possibly.
And I'm going to stick some Ramjet rookie on there, never learned how to do that, let alone does he know that if he collapses a pipe because you have less than 20 pounds of pressure underneath that you've now created a public hazard because people can't drink that water? We've got issues. And so what I'm advocating and what you're talking about doing is hiring a professional that has myriad of background. You heard it as we talked about it up here. A myriad of background. Yeah, we all have MPAs, but we also, you know, Ian worked in a smaller community. Dustin has worked in larger communities, and we all have some of that different background, but we've gone through the theory, we've gone through the professional part of it, but we're learning the other sides of it, and we're going to bring those things to you. And so, you know, that fit and flexibility is there. You know, the outside, the intangibles, and you know, I would hope that the people in Yorktown would say this of me, and this is what I live in my community. I'm active in my community. I sit on different boards, and not just because it's part of my job, because I want my community to succeed. Excuse me. And those, you know, that's part of the fit. You know, when I got there, I was the deputy town manager, and I was very lucky to work my way into it. But now, you know, I don't want to leave because I've got all these friends, and not saying that day won't come, but I've got all these friends, and I've got all of these things that we're seeing the quality of life improve. We're seeing the neighborhoods be active. We're seeing all those things, and so those are the things that you want to drive. And so as I look at Clarksville, and we took a 10-minute drive around. This is a gorgeous community. You've got lots of stuff going on. And I go back to what Mark had to say. It is about fit. It's about the control that you want to exercise versus the flexibility that you want to get them. But it's also saying, okay, hey, here's what we want in this individual. You know, we want them to be active. We want them to be seen. We want them at the Chamber of Commerce. We want them talking to people, doing those kinds of things. Because quite honestly, if I was looking to come down here, those are the things that I'm going to be looking at. If you're telling me, well, yeah, you can come down here and, you know, you can be in charge of you know, we'll let you spend $1,000, even though we've budgeted for a $2 million project, but anything over that $1,000 has to come back to me. I don't want to do that, you know, but you have to trust me. And some of that's built in, you know. I'm lucky enough that I'm now working on, I've got one council member that's left when I hired on. So, you know, I've been able to work through that, and there's had to be that built trust, and that requires communication. And I think one of the questions is, you know, what's the ideal town manager doing? He's communicating, he or she's communicating, and figuring out that this one likes to talk, and the other one likes to text, and the third one likes to email, and one of them likes to have breakfast every Monday morning before a council meeting, and all those things work because we're figuring out what does it, but we're communicating and we're making sure that everybody is on the same page driving forward. So I'll stop because I like to hear myself talk too, so I apologize.
Nice. I enjoy it.
Well, thank you.
On that note,
Yeah.
My name is Dustin Anderson. Thank you to Mark and Pete for going first, because I can build off what you said and change my mind about what I was going to say. It makes my job a little bit easier. So I was the first new manager in my community in 30 years. So my council had an opportunity, just like you do, to examine what they want and how they wanted to do it. So depending on where you sit is where you stand. I don't know if you ever heard that. Something that stuck with me when my mom told it to me when I was very young. So my council, before I arrived, was going through a kind of a soul searching. Like, what do we want? And so that goes back to what you've heard from Mark and Pete about the rightness of fit. You're going to see a whole host of people who can academically do the job. They'll be qualified. It's finding the right person. And my council chose me because of my particular background. Everybody has a different set of skills. So I was a consultant for a number of years. Actually, I worked with Brittany back there. We worked for Management Partners. So when you work in the private sector, as most people do, you know the customer's always right. My job was to identify the deliverable, and if sometimes you respond to a job, the customer doesn't really know what they want, right? They know they want something different, and it's your job to articulate that, make sure that that's exactly what they want, and then deliver it better than they expected, right? So that's just part of my personality. That's what I like to do. It was very data-driven, kind of antiseptic. I really enjoyed it. And then when I went to Greenwich, Greenwich is a big town. 62,000 people. It's very flat though. It's not like around here where you have strong individual powers. Like there's a county commissioner or there's a mayor. In Greenwich, democracy was like a sport. You participated, it's your hobby, right? So instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 7 council members, we had a legislative body of 233. They met 9 times a year, no less, and only more if they were really grumpy. Instead of a clerk treasurer or a comptroller, we had a board of estimate and taxation. That's 12 independently, partisanly elected individuals. Instead of 1 mayor, we had 3 board of selectmen, and 1 was full-time. But that full-time board of selectmen only supervised maybe a third of the 2,600 employees. So there's boards, there's planning commissions, there's tax assessors. Some of them are elected, some of them are. It's a mess, basically, is what I'm saying. And my job there was to take policies thought up by a plurality of these individuals and then implement them across this entire incredibly functional but dysfunctional organization. So I was able to do that because I just talk you to death. I'm completely transparent. I have no secret information, and I say the same thing over and over and over and over again until you don't want to be in the room with me because you know exactly what I'm going to say. And my council wanted that. They wanted someone who could articulate what they wanted and then be completely open about it and then make sure it got done. So that goes back to the rightness of fit. And Mr. Jim asked a couple of specific examples, like what's the relationships and the roles. So in preparation, we were asked to provide the ordinance that enabled the town manager position in each of our respective communities. So I had actually never looked up mine. I knew the state code that has the enumerated powers and responsibilities granted by the state of Indiana. So I looked up mine, and it was a few letters. It said, "There shall be a town manager." Right? So tabula rasa. And my responsibilities are pretty broad and pretty deep. So I am in charge of the day-to-day financial management of budgets. Sure, we have a clerk treasurer. They make sure we spend our appropriated amount and follow certain protocols. But if you spend too much, it's me that gives you a call and says, let's have a conversation, right? I'm the economic development director. I'm the planning director. I'm the HR director. When I arrived, I was the public works director and the parks director, and I said, that's crazy. So they let me hire someone, but this is how I did it. We had a process. I'm big on processes because processes include people and they create buy-in, right? So if you're a council right now, and how I would approach my council when I arrived is, I'm a new property, right? You're gonna have a new person. I wanna create an environment where people and their opinions are valued and incorporated because I'm just doing what you want me to do. And that's at the end of the day, that's exactly what I do. I say it more often than I care to. This is my opinion. That and $2 will get you a cup of coffee, right? So I'm really here to do what you want me to do. So when we made those hiring decisions, I brought council along. I said, out of the 5 of you, who wants to sit in on these? And they had never been asked that question before. So a couple sat in, and they chose not to ask questions or evaluate those candidates. They just were surprised and pleased to be a part of that conversation. And I've done that with our budgeting process, with any kind of policy they want. And that's a good example. Policies, I'm in charge of implementing policies. Council, you're in charge of setting those policies. Now, I have a little bit more time on my hands than you do because I work for you. So I'll sit down and I'll facilitate that discussion. But what you see when you consider what you want to vote on should not be a surprise when you read your council packet. It should look, in large part, some kind of conglomeration of what you all told me. And if it is a surprise, then I've failed, because my job is not to bring you something that I think is a great thing that you've never heard. It's to facilitate a discussion and then implement that decision that council makes. I've been talking for a while.
It's only like 8 minutes.
Really?
But only Ian's keeping track.
So we are all very different, and Ian's keeping track, so I'll let Ian go.
I actually wasn't. I just happened to.
You don't have to apologize.
I happened to look at the clock.
Don't walk it back. Don't walk it back.
All right. I want to apologize that Councilor Matthews couldn't join us this morning. We had been planning this all week, and he called me toward the end of the day yesterday and got called out on business, and there was no way to make it. So I hurriedly called the other 4 council members, and they were like, "Wait, what? Tomorrow? How far away? With you?" But actually, I thought it's kind of illustrative, right? So because he has a full-time job and a series of very important responsibilities, as they all do. But Jeff and the other 4 members are also people that care tremendously about Speedway and its well-being as a community. And so Jeff is one of our newest council members. He came in to fill the last year, which was the last year of his predecessor's term. His predecessor was on our fire department, was no longer eligible to run. He resigned with a year remaining in his term so that a likely successor would have an opportunity to kind of fill in a little bit. And it was great because Jeff has spent his whole life in Speedway. He's really a great member of the community, and he was very eager to say, "I'm diving in. Day one, I'm doing this, and we're doing this," and most managers would sort of start to slowly creep away from the table, a little nervous about that level of enthusiasm. But to me, it was energizing because I have a relationship with my council that's very positive, that we work on, that we talk regularly, we communicate in our own way as individuals, as citizens, as residents, as friends, as colleagues, as an employer-employee relationship. And to be able to take that energy and convert that into policy that isn't going to take 6 or 7 hours out of your normal working day, where you can continue to function and still be providing an impact to your community through a professional that you trust. So I apologize that he wasn't able to make it, because I know he would have at least said a few nice things about the work that I do. Either way, in addition to my role as town manager in Speedway, Indiana, I am a resident of the town of Speedway, Indiana. I am an associate member of the faculty at IUPUI, School of Public and Environmental Affairs. Prior to that, I was an adjunct instructor at IU Northwest in Gary. I'm a volunteer in our community. My wife is an educator. She teaches in a neighboring school district, but we both lived in Speedway. Coincidentally, the first town manager to live in Speedway was me, which actually, you know, it's kind of a balancing act, because we want to be able to say that the decisions that we make or that we execute, the policies that we put in place, affect us the same as any other citizen. And to have that establishes some credibility as far as the person that you have implementing policy. Now, the challenge with that is, you know, people know where you live. And they're going to, you know, as you guys know, they're going to tell you when your trash shouldn't get picked up. Or they're going to ask your wife why your neighbor doesn't have a dog license. She'll be like, "I'm sorry, I don't have access to that database, sir. It is 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You could go find Ian at his office." The benefit, I think, but let me go back even further before I start talking about some of the things about the position. My great-grandmother was an appointed controller, a finance manager in the 1950s in Mishawaka, Indiana. And it was always so fascinating that my my dad's maternal side of the family all worked in local government. Especially a great grandmother as essentially a CFO in that place and time. And that formed the basis for a real desire, I think, in our family and in our household to serve and to seek opportunities to do that. And so, as a part of getting an education, I had never really thought much about being a city manager, being a town manager as a career, until I realized that it was the opportunity to both have keen business sense, build successful relationships, coach, mentor, teach, volunteer, and actually make an impact that you can see every single day. And to get paid to do that is an incredible experience, but I will tell you that the greatest benefit that I've ever derived from this job has been working with my team of department heads and staff. That, to me, to be able to do everything that I can to encourage those individuals to do their best and to reach their own potential is by far and away the most rewarding part of this. And what the challenge is that there's always a sort of reticence. Oh, it's a new boss, right? You see this in businesses. Businesses, boards of directors will appoint a CEO, and it's a learning process, right? You have to build these relationships, and you have to engage with people, and you have to build trust, and it's also a two-way street. You have to be able to evaluate the talent that you have, but also understand the culture and the system that exists that you came into, finding meaningful ways to improve it, but also not blowing up the system if the system can work. Now, has there been times I've blown up the system? Absolutely. Everyone up on this panel will tell you there are times when things are dysfunctional. Cognitive dissonance allows us to sort of look at a problem and go, no, that's fine. That's over there. And put those blinders on until it becomes an issue. Bringing in somebody who has the training, but is also somebody that you're going to trust, that is also somebody that understands and appreciates your culture, is somebody who can come in and make those evaluative decisions in their proper context. That will tell you, hey, it seems a little weird that we budget like this. Or it seems kind of odd that these responsibilities are in this department and not here. And so, why do I say that? Because we've started the conversation about the discussion, the difference between flexibility and control. And that is an important distinction. But there are 7 of you, and you're going to fall at different points on that spectrum. But what Pete said, and what Dustin reiterated, and what Mark started out with, is that really it's about values. That the things that you value establish your culture, and thereby you're able to bring in somebody that you can trust, who can work with your team, that can take on the challenges that you face. And at the end of the day, you're going to have somebody who's going to take all the responsibility and defer all the credit. I gave my students a TLDR, which if you ever look at the comments on like a newspaper article where somebody puts TLDR, it's too long, didn't read, and then they give you a 1 sentence. I said, okay guys, here's your textbook, but the too long didn't read is that you need to defer all credit and accept all responsibility. If you want to be a city manager, or you want to be a professional, or you want to be a leader, that's where you need to be. And so, for me, it's awesome to have an opportunity to just get a check every 2 weeks to do what I love to do, and also to see the improvements in the community and the improvements in the esteem of my council members, how they're viewed in the community, how their lifelong relationships and their standing in the community also improves with those projects. I think that the other things you have to consider are how you're going to keep this person accountable. Right? If you're going to enter into a contract with somebody presumably from outside of your community, so and there's going to be some reticence from citizens, from staff, from you guys. There's always that period, right, where you're feeling each other out. Have those standards early, and your consultants can help you with that. Your community can help you with that. Your steering committee can help you with that. But have an idea of what accountability looks like. Are you going to review once a year? Are you going to have performance measurements? Have some semblance of what that standard to you should be. What's it like at your job? That's a good baseline. And then think about what the ideal relationship between you as a board of directors and your chief appointed officer should be. What should that look like? Are you collegial? Are you friends? Is it professional? Is it in writing? Is it in person? And lay that out on the front end. Just make that very clear so that the transition time that you're enduring on the front end can be as short as possible. And then, you know, for me in Speedway, we're a town with about half a billion dollars in assessed value, and we have close to $250 million in new economic development activity right now. I mean, underway. I shouldn't have left. Anyway, the challenge is having somebody who's able to leverage business relationships and government relationships and marshal the resources to address your needs and build partnerships that get those sorts of deals done. And having a manager brings gravitas to that process. It brings an air of professionalism that, you know, a lot of people that are looking to invest in your community, and it's apparent that there's a lot of investment going on, are going to look for and are going to want to see. With that, I know that this has got to be kind of a anxious process to go through. I assure you, your candidates and your manager will go through a very similar process. But finding somebody who shares your values and who's motivated by the right sorts of things is going to make this community great. Thank you.
And now to provide the other point of view, here are the elected officials of Indiana.
I love this. You kind of sit here and listen. You know, I tell Pete that he talks about, okay, this and this and this, and you got to believe 50% of what he says. It's up to you which 50%. So, what these guys have said, I do agree wholeheartedly with. There's a lot of good points in there. Ladies and gentlemen, our role, and I'm speaking to council, I don't have to tell you what our role is. You know, as elected, people elected us to represent them, represent our communities. We're charged with legislation to decide what is best for our community. And in that, we have to provide oversight and direction, and that's what we're charged to do to the town manager, to provide oversight and direction of what we want him to do. If you're afraid that you're going to lose control, no, that's in your hands. That is totally in your hands. When it comes down to spending, sure, you give him a certain spending authority, but everything comes before you to direct, no, we agree with this, no, you're not going to do this. There's not a council meeting we go through that we say, no, Pete, we're not going in that direction, we want to do this, or we want to do that. Yes, you have that control, you have that ability to do. So that should never be an issue. What this helps with, in my mind, I'm a big guy on planning. You've got to, I always believe that if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. That is one thing. I'm a business owner, have been for 25 years now. And before that, I was a strategic business planner for an environmental firm. So we all know what our strengths and weaknesses are, and that's what we have to deal with. What I do know as a council member is that my strengths and weaknesses are not in water and wastewater. Okay, I do know that. I do know that I'm not a law enforcement officer, I'm not a fireman. What we do is we hire the key individuals to oversee that area. And as a collective unit, our town manager oversees them. One thing that I will caution you is, my job is not to get caught up in the minutia. I don't want to be involved in the day-to-day operations. That is not my job. My job is to make sure that we are heading in the direction, the correct direction that is best for our community and our town. That is my job. That's what I was elected to do. So I have another full-time job too. If I wanted to be in that direction, I would have gone into public administration. So this is something that we were elected to do the best thing for our communities as a council. Now, what makes this work? Bottom line, communication. Communication makes this thing work. I am in touch with Pete frequently as the president of the council. That's something that you'll find. As a council members, I can't speak for each of them individually. They all have their strengths and weaknesses too. Our benefit is our diversity in our council, I'm proud to say that our council is very educated. We are made up of a lot of business owners in various degrees as far as that goes. We all are vested in the community very strongly, and that's what you want. I agree with Ian and what Pete had said and everybody. You want your town manager to be vested in your community. I cannot imagine having a town manager to come in that is not going to do that. That's not going to live in that community and be involved in that community. That's paramount. We want to make sure we're fiscally responsible for as council members. We rely a lot on information. What we have used Pete as is a great conduit to get that information and pull that information together for us in the meetings. And I don't know what type of value you can put on that, but it is incredible, absolutely incredible to be able to have all that information. When we go into a meeting, and sometimes we get criticism from this, we go into a meeting, our council meetings are held the third Monday of the month, and our goal is to be out of that meeting in an hour, and most of the time we are. Now, when we have bigger projects, bigger issues that come up, sure, we spend time, but what we do is we have information available to us to evaluate that ahead of time. So when you go in the meeting, our mind might not be made up. That's not the goal. The goal is to have all of the information in your hands to be able to make an educated decision, okay? And we use him a lot to get information, and we go outside of him as well. We're not afraid to ask different consultants for that information as well. I think that's a dangerous thing that you can get into, is just rely on one person all the time. So the idea is to do our homework before we get into those meetings, and then we can debate up there and go through things, and we're not afraid to disagree with each other. But the majority of the time, when we get to a decision, we're ready to go. And then you can table. If you're really not ready to make that decision, you table and say, hey, let's get some more information. So we have done that. We had a major project, a major environmental project in our area that we tabled and tabled and tabled until we were able to get all the information and make a decision. So that is available to you. Pete is our manager. He directs the traffic for us. We approve the department heads every year. He presents this to us and gives us our recommendations. That's up to us to approve who is going to be our town marshal, who's going to be our fire chief, who's going to be head of our parks, who's going to be head of redevelopment. All of that is appointed by the council. We take recommendations from our town manager on that. So that's how that works. So he's strong in his advisory expertise. I love it that Pete has had the expertise to bring to us in the water area. Like I said, I talked about strengths and weaknesses. It's not our strength. On the board, we're lucky. On our board, we do have a gentleman that is involved with the sanitary district of Muncie. He lives in Yorktown. So he's able to bring a different outlook on that. But at the same time, the infrastructure and expertise that Pete has as far as roads, water, maintenance, everything like that is pretty strong. That helps us out a lot. And other than relying solely on our consultants that we use, we do have a little bit of insight on that. Spending and hiring. Those are two things that as a board, I did mention we don't want to get involved in the smaller things. We have our managers. Right now we're going through new hire on our police department. We're real careful not to get involved into, hey, I've got a friend, hey, I've got an uncle, I've got a relative on doing that. And we're in a small community. That's hard. That's really hard. But if you want to avoid the pitfalls and the headaches of having little issues come up to where somebody has an insight, well, my uncle's a council member or something like that, then you go through the hiring process like it should be, and you take the recommendations and you look at that and evaluate that. So that's what we've done that a few times now, and that works. I'll tell you what, it takes the headache away. I hate, and one of my biggest things I always tell Pete and everybody else, I hate personnel issues. As a council member, I don't want to deal with personnel issues. That's why we hired him. That's why we hired him. Take that headache away. That's why we have that in place right there. That's fantastic. We have the final say, but I'll tell you what, that does. Budgeting and things like that. Spending, we do have a spending limit. Will always be in place. That is protection on both ends. It allows him the flexibility to manage the business on a day-to-day basis. When there's a big purchase, like a $1.1 million fire truck, then we step in and go through the due diligence that's necessary to do that. So that's kind of what you're looking at in there. They mentioned priorities. Pete brought that up, and it was echoed by the other gentleman as well. What's great in doing this whole process is going through and being able to do the planning and everything. You know, we focus on making sure our infrastructure is in place, but after that, and he does this a couple times a year, especially when we come up on budgeting for the next year, we all have ideas. Every council member has their own ideas of, hey, this is what we'd like to see, this is what we'd like to see. And, you know, we kind of push that on him and say, you know, we want this done, we want this done. And he's making notes at the end of the year, and we have this big laundry list. That's when we get to prioritizing. And there are those projects. Okay, maybe we can do phase one of this project, whatever. That's kind of what the council, that's what's great for. That's planning and direction. What can we get done within our parameters? So that is an important key that he's able to do. Pete had mentioned, it's kind of funny, that yes, we do have one council member left since he came on board in
I came on board in 06.
06.
Yeah.
So he came on board in 06. So what that tells me is you have a bad habit of wearing out council members.
Probably true.
That's not true, actually. And from my perspective, I don't get involved in politics. Hey, we were elected. We're politicians, right? I hate that. I absolutely hate that. But what can bog you down are politics. That can put a stick in the spokes bigger than anything. Try to avoid that. Try to avoid that. Pete and I are different political parties. It doesn't come up. It has no factor in how we do and we look at our business.
And by that, he means that he's a Republican and I'm an independent. Different political parties.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what you're starting to come over now. No.
I didn't say that.
No, that really, that's not a factor, and it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. If you want success in your town, that should not come into play. Should not. You want the best person who is going to guide your town in the direction you want to head it. Okay? It has no bearing on the way your town should grow. I am very proud of the community we live in. We are one of the very few communities in this state that has had steady growth in the population of our community for 10 years straight. And we continue to grow. We are a 5-star school in our community. Our only drawback is we failed to plan 20 to 25 years ago. And now we're in a heavy redevelopment that we're trying to find funding for and to do that planning. Our per capita income is a little over $60,000. It's fantastic, but we also don't have that commercial tax base. And you guys, what a gift you guys have. I am absolutely impressed with what you guys have here. You have a great opportunity ahead of you. I love the town manager or city manager position when you look at that, because guess what? It takes politics out of play.
Yeah.
If you can always keep that model, stick with it, because it takes that element out of play. And I think the biggest failure that we can get into is having a personal agenda get in the way of the benefit and the betterment of your community. Thank you.
All right, thank you all very much. This takes us about exactly an hour since we started. We're going to take our break.